Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Library Talk and Everything Else. I'm your host, DJ JC. Today's Thursday, March 27th, and it is raining really hard over here in Brownsville. It's been raining all night since about 5 o'clock in the morning. Hopefully, you are staying safe, staying dry. I don't know so much about the Upper Valley weather, excuse me, but here in Brownsville, it is really raining bad. I mean, I saw a professor pulling into the parking lot with a kayak, so it is just incredibly wet. I'm just kidding, by the way. But it is really wet, so stay safe. Be careful out there. Uh, Hopefully, everybody had a wonderful spring break. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about so many things, and we are looking forward to those shows being uploaded onto the Vaquero Radio YouTube channel. I do want to thank Student Media, Jan, and his staff for helping us out and put this show together and all the other shows that are available on Vaquero Radio. So if you are interested in listening to some of them, you can go to Vaquero Radio's YouTube channel, and a lot of the shows have already been downloaded, and we're still pending some wonderful shows for this semester, but they are working on them. And as soon as they go up, please support all the shows that are produced by UTRGV Vaquero Radio. So we're really excited to have you listen to those shows, and we're excited to have you here. If this is the first time you are coming to the show, thank you so much for finding us. If you have been a longtime supporter, we truly appreciate you making this show possible. So thank you so much, all of you. So we are already going into April. Next week's show will already be April 3rd. And so the semester is going by very quickly. And if anything that is needed when it comes to research or library assistance, do not hesitate, because the semester is going to end fairly quickly as soon as we get back into the swing of things. It is going to just be over by May. So we're looking forward to that. We are looking forward to some of the breaks that we may have, including Easter for some of us that have that. And so it's going to go by really fast. I think April's going to go by so quickly. But again, we are here. We are looking forward to this end of the semester as far as what we can accomplish, what we can do. And I don't know, see where the future takes us with this show as well. So again, thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of it, because you are a major contributor to the show. So with that said, what are we going to talk about today? Today, we're going to talk about television. A couple of weeks back, we spoke about movies and how movies made us feel. But today, we're going to talk about television and how television has changed, has evolved. We're going to take a look at a little bit of the history of television, as well as what do we get from TV. We're going to look at some top 10 shows. We're going to look at moments that changed the world and moments where we all stopped and had to watch television. So again, thank you so much for being here. With us celebrating the end of March and Women's History Month, we're going to play some music from very talented female artists. You're listening to Library Talk and Everything Else, only on Vaquero Radio, the Valley's student station. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much again for joining us for Library Talk and Everything Else. If you're just joining us after the music break, today we're going to be talking about television. I mentioned earlier that we talked about movies and how movies make us feel, the psychological effects of movies, collectively what we gather when we're in a movie theater. So today we're going to talk about television, because television is a little different in that we're at home. We may surround ourselves with people when we're watching a football game or some finale of a show, but for the most part, we're doing it by ourselves and following these different shows. So as part of the research, and part of the research question for today is going to be, how do different genres of television programming impact viewers' emotional response and overall well-being? And again, in my research, I found that there are both positive and negative effects to watching television. And so when we start breaking down why we watch television, what we get from watching television, there are so many things that come of it. You know, we get out of work, we go home, we just want to relax, we maybe get something to eat, we watch television as we're eating. Before we go to bed, we want to watch something funny, so we might watch The Tonight Show. We might watch a comedy show before we go to bed. We've had long days. We have had stressful days. And that's one of the first things about television and its positive effects are that allows us the opportunity to relax and escape for a little bit. This temporary escape, and we talked about that when we were discussing movies, that for those 2 hours that you're in a movie theater with the rest of the audience, you are escaping your reality and you suspend your disbelief. And that's the same thing with television. You're watching a movie on television, you're watching a show, you're binge watching something, you get to relax for that time of the day, and it's a daily de-stressor, and it gives you this sense of comfort and relaxation. It boosts your mood. Certain shows, whether you're watching something funny, whether you're watching something that you really enjoy and you follow, it releases, these endorphins, dopamine, and that leads to feelings of happiness. When you're watching a funny show and you've never seen that show before, and you start laughing and you start just following that show because every week it's going to make you laugh, that makes you feel good. It, again, boosts your mood. And that's why we continue to watch it. And there are some shows that are very stressful that could bring you down. Shows like Breaking Bad. I used to watch Breaking Bad, and every show was such a stressful episode. You didn't know what was going to happen. I'll talk a little bit about my favorite shows, and I also have, as I mentioned earlier, some top 10 lists and some shows that have been made just iconic because of their viewing audiences, because of their writing. There's so many different things that make a show successful. And the thing about television, it's a medium that changes so quickly. 1 week we're watching a show that we really enjoy, and maybe we're the only ones that enjoy it. And then we find out that it's canceled because there was no viewership. And maybe you, as you're sitting there listening to the show, you're thinking about maybe some television show that you really enjoyed, and it only lasted a couple of weeks and a couple of episodes. I remember there was a show on ABC called The Lottery, and it was a wonderful show about this group of people that had worked together for many years, and every week they bought lottery tickets together collectively. And the show was great. I think it only lasted about 2 or 3 episodes. And what happened in the show was that every week these people would gather their money together and buy lottery tickets. Well, 1 week they win the lottery, and one of the individuals that had been part of that company, he did not participate. And so his family is thinking, "Oh, we won the lottery," and he has no heart to tell them, "I did not participate in the lottery this week, the week that we won." And the show was great. It only lasted about 2 episodes. And again, I wanted to follow that one. That was one that I wanted to follow, and they canceled it after 2 episodes. Again, the reasoning behind it, low viewership, maybe the storylines, whatever, the writing. But whatever it was, that was a show that I thought to myself, I can get behind this one. But they canceled it. So we get invested into these shows, and there's this social connection of sharing those viewing experiences with those that we care about and those that we work with. How many water cooler moments have we seen on television where we come back the next day and we talk to our coworkers about it? Or we call our family members to discuss, "Hey, did you see this particular show?" One of the main water cooler moments was a couple of years back in Game of Thrones. The Red Wedding. And it seems like they reset everything with that episode. And that was a water cooler moment where people were talking about it. There was so much on the internet about it. If you didn't watch it, you were disconnected. Again, we talked about this when we discussed movies. We go to the movies and everybody's talking about this particular movie and I haven't seen it. I have nothing to talk about. And that happened to me. And I know I'm dating myself, but when I was a sophomore in high school, that summer of going to become a sophomore, the main movie of that summer, the summer blockbuster, was Terminator 2. I never saw that. And I get to school the first days, and everybody's talking about the graphics of Terminator 2, the action, and I had nothing to talk about. And I couldn't even make it up because I hadn't seen the movie. And that's the same thing with television. Did you watch this show? Oh, no, I haven't seen that one. Oh, well, everybody's talking about it. So again, the social connection that we make when we all follow the same show or we see an episode that everybody else is watching. And we learn from television as well. If you ever watch a documentary, you learn from that. Netflix has such wonderful documentaries that it's too many sometimes. And that's the thing about television. When it used to be the big three, as they called them, ABC, CBS, and NBC, those were the leaders at the time. And now television has evolved. Now you have these streaming services, Peacock, Netflix, Paramount. All of these services are out there. And so you want to watch a great show like Yellowstone, they want you to pay for that. As opposed to the way it used to be before, where you could just sit in front of CBS every Wednesday night and watch your favorite show. And now they're asking us to pay. So as we talk about the evolution of television, that's one of the ways that things have differed and have changed. And so the big three are still there. CBS, NBC, and ABC, they're still putting out shows, but are we really watching them through there? Because a lot of times if we don't get to watch it live, we can watch it the next day on Hulu. So television is changing. And what used to be also big name actors making the jump from television to movies, now a lot of these main big A-list stars are making the move back to television. And I think COVID did a real big number on television. It affected everything, but Hollywood was one of the things that also got affected. The production of television, the production of movies. And so what you had was a lot of these big stars now doing television. Robin Williams, I know he passed on before the pandemic, but he was a big name actor that ended up having to do television. Hilary Swank. These are actors that, again, had won Oscars and have done wonderful work in movies, but they went back and scaled things down to television. So there's a lot that TV has kind of evolved from, and we're going to take a look at the history of television. But what does television do for us as well when we want to watch a show over and over again? And I am guilty of this. We rewatch these shows because it is comforting. We may know the exact line that's going to come up. We may know the exact scene that we're going to see because we've seen this millions of times. But it is something comforting. And it's familiar to us. And it gives us this feeling of self-control. I know for myself, I can watch the following shows, and some of you may be familiar with these, some of you may have not heard of these shows, but Seinfeld, I can watch Seinfeld anytime, and fortunately, Seinfeld is on Netflix, so I can watch it at any time that I want. Night Court was a show back in the 80s that I loved in its prime, and it's available on Amazon Prime, another streaming service. So I get to watch a Night Court anytime I want to. And if you're familiar with this 90s, late 80s, going into the 90s, Saved by the Bell, I am a big fan of Saved by the Bell as well. And so Saved by the Bell, I'll give you an example of that. Saved by the Bell is available 24/7 through Roku. There is a 24/7 channel for Saved by the Bell. So I can watch show after show of Saved by the Bell. And you have your own shows that you like to rewatch. Just like we like to rewatch our movies. There are also shows that we like to rewatch because, again, it's something familiar to us. But with all those positive things, sometimes we have some negative effects of watching television. And I talked a little bit about this earlier, about Breaking Bad and how stressful that show was. So the anxiety and stress of watching a show like that, and again, we suspend our disbelief, but for that hour, we are on pins and needles and we're anxious and we're stressed out because we sometimes can relate so much to the characters or we connect with them because the writing and the acting is so good. Bryan Cranston, amazing actor. And we felt everything that he was going through. Wonderful show if you haven't seen it. But sometimes the news puts us in a depressing state as well. There's so much violent content that we see, and unfortunately, that is real. And so that sometimes stresses us out. I mean, it's important for us to be a part of knowing what's going on in the world, but sometimes it's just a little stressful. And excessive TV viewing sometimes can lead to social isolation and this decline in real life interactions. So we really need to be careful with that. Certain television, if you're watching a show that's very stressful and emotional, it can trigger some feelings of low self-esteem. Some shows cover some really intense topics. Exposure to materialistic values, sometimes that are portrayed to television, it just leads us to our own dissatisfaction with what we have in our own life. When we're watching these reality shows and we see these people that are living these extraordinary lives and extravagant lives, and we become connected to that at a level where we start getting upset, we start becoming unhappy with what they have and we don't. And reality television is such a big component of television. So many reality shows. Too much television viewing, and I remember this one from when we were young, often leads to this sedentary lifestyle where we don't interact physically with our surroundings because we're so engrossed in television. When we binge watch and we're watching television and we're eating snacks and cookies and ice cream, every once in a while it's okay. But a lot of times if we're doing that too much, then we negate our working out. And we neglect as well our physical activity. And again, going back to reality television, sometimes we have this distorted reality when we see these shows. And we think, oh, well, everybody that lives in California lives like this. Or everybody that is on The Bachelor is that good looking. And we start comparing ourselves to that. And again, these distorted perceptions of our reality. And binge watching, I talked about that earlier, that can lead to feelings of emptiness and isolation if you are by yourself binge watching a show. And we all binge watch, but we need to be careful when we do that because we can't be doing that every single day. I mean, again, there's nothing wrong with it, but, is it really that great of a show that we need to invest 8 hours? And I will admit that I did binge watch Yellowstone during COVID. I did watch episode after episode after episode. One more episode. I'm just going to watch one more episode. So again, you have your positive effects and the negative effects of watching television. Like everything else. So when we look at the history of television, and I do my research for this show, and this is a research-based show, and one of the things that I really enjoy is going down these rabbit holes and looking for information and researching information. As a librarian, I think that's what we enjoy doing. And so I got this from TCL.com, and I'm going to read this as the history of television, a brief history, so just kind of bear with me here. According to TCL.com, television was invented in 1884, and it took more than a decade for the first television sets to be created and marketed. Even then, it was just seen as a novelty and not much else. In fact, only around 50 people had televisions at the time, but in a few decades, television became one of the most innovative forms of entertainment ever created. And its role changed significantly since then, and it has. Again, we talked about some of those evolutions. Since the 1940s and 1950s, when television first arrived on the scene, it profoundly altered the world's viewing habits and has undergone significant change and shift in the way they are manufactured and the price. And they've progressively improved over the past years. Color television debuted in the 1960s, then cable television in the 1970s, VCRs, if you remember those, in the 1980s, and then high-definition TV in the late 90s. And in the 21st century, viewers are just as likely to watch programs on tablets, computers, cell phones even. How many times have we watched a television show while we're on our cell phone? So the way we watch TV, what we get from TV, has dramatically changed. I mean, just look at the picture quality. They went from black and white to color to now high definition, and 4K and 8K became available in 2016. And we talked about this earlier as well, about the big three, ABC, NBC, and CBS. And again, there were only very few channels available, and now you're looking at so many satellite channels, streaming channels, and streaming services like Netflix and Amazon Prime offer so many options. There's too much sometimes to watch. I go through the remote and I go through these different streaming services that I have, and I can't find anything. So I was like, you know what? Let me just watch a Night Court. Let me just watch Seinfeld. Or let me watch a documentary that I've always seen before. And what about our viewing habits? Sometimes we get into those groups and we watch the finales. We watch the Super Bowl. We watch the World Series. And the fact that we can download and stream content on demand, that one show that we wanted to watch and we missed back in the 90s because it was at 7 o'clock on Thursdays. We didn't get to watch because we were at work. Now we can download it and stream it at any time. And again, talking about these devices, your tablets, your cell phones that you can watch these television shows on. So again, so many different things that have evolved from television. Digital television, man, it replaced analog television in 2009. I don't know if you remember that, when they made that switch. It had been promoted and advertised that we're going to make that switch. We're going to make that switch. That switch is coming. And remember, for those of us that did not have digital televisions, we had to buy an adapter for it to pick up the signal. And then smart TVs, now this internet access-based television where you can just do so many things on. Surf the web on your smart TVs. Tell it what you want to watch. And then in 2010, 3D TVs became available. And that was something only able to be done in movies, at the movie theater. So televisions have changed the way we view television, how we watch television. All these different things are part of TV. And you see, as I mentioned earlier, you see companies still investing into television. Companies are still putting out shows. They're still out there making a variety of different reality television shows. So television is not changing in the way that it's going away, but rather it's evolving in the way that we as viewers, our habits are changing. So there's so much more to talk about. I'm really excited about this conversation. I'm glad that you're here, part of it, and that you allow us to be part of your Thursday morning. So we're going to go to some music right now. You're listening to Library Talk and everything else only on Vaquero Radio, the Valley's student station. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us back on Library Talk and everything else only on Vaquero Radio, the Valley's student station. So we've talked about how television has evolved, a little bit of history of television. And so now, as part of the research, I wanted to find what are the top 10 highly acclaimed television series that are often considered amongst the best of all time. Again, we may not agree with this list. Some of these shows I've never watched. Maybe some of you are going to say, I agree with that. Maybe you don't. And so I want to hear from you. If you have any questions about the show or ideas for future episodes, please feel free to contact me at libraryguy03@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you and some show ideas as we move forward. I talked about that at the beginning, how we are looking at, we're going to have a summer break, but then we'll come back in the fall for next season. And I have so many ideas of what we want to do, so many ideas of guests that I want to have on the show. So we are excited about this, but I want to hear from you. And we want to hear what your take is on our show. And again, some show ideas. libraryguy03@gmail.com. So again, I'm going to go down this list. And some of you may know some of these shows. I'll talk a little bit about some experiences that I've had with these shows. Some I know of them, but I have never watched them. So let me go down the list here. According to this, it's the 10 highly acclaimed television series often considered among the best of all time. Okay? And they encompass various genres. So some are comedy, some are dramas, and things like that. So I'll go over this list. The first one on the list is Breaking Bad. And Breaking Bad is a transformative drama about a high school chemistry teacher who turns to drug manufacturing, after being diagnosed with cancer. Breaking Bad, I talked about that one, is a very stressful show, a really great, well-written, well-acted television show that went from 2008 to 2013. So Breaking Bad. The next one is The Sopranos from 1999 to 2007. This is a landmark crime drama exploring the life of a New Jersey-based Italian-American mob boss and his family. This is a show that I have seen. It was on HBO. It was a great show. Every episode, I didn't follow the whole series, but I remember watching individual episodes and kind of catching up. And it was a wonderful, wonderful, well-written show as well. And that's what you're going to get. And I guess that's the hallmark of a great show and a great series, is that it keeps you invested. It keeps you wanting to come back. And you can watch all of Sopranos on Max if you have that. This is a show that I remember hearing about, but I've never seen it. This is a gritty and realistic police drama that delves into the inner workings of a Baltimore drug trading and its impact on the city. And this is The Wire. This went from 2002 to 2008. I've heard so many wonderful things about this show, but I've never seen this one. Game of Thrones from 2011 to 2019. And we talked about that. That was a water cooler moment. The Red Wedding, when it seemed like the show just reset itself. Now, for a lot of people that are fans of Game of Thrones, the series, you knew it was coming. But for us casual watchers of it, we had no idea that's what they were going to do. So Game of Thrones from 2011 to 2019. I talked about this one earlier. This is a show that I could watch anytime. It's a show about nothing. Seinfeld from 1989 to 1998. It's a show about the mundane lives of four friends in New York City. And again, it's known for its observational humor and iconic characters. And it's four characters that just have changed the way we view television. And the thing about that show was that a lot of companies were starting to kind of take that formula of these four people and these friends, and that's another show, Friends, that came about because Seinfeld kind of changed the way television was being done at the time. And it was about nothing, and it promotes itself as a show about nothing. So Seinfeld, a wonderful show that I have watched so many times and still continue to laugh at because it is such a well-written show. Friends, we just talked about that, from 1994 to 2004. And if you don't know this show, it's a popular sitcom following the lives of six friends and in their 20s navigating relationships, careers, and life in New York City. Now, this is one show that I wanted to watch, but I just never had a chance to. And this is Mad Men from 2007 to 2015. It's a period drama set in the 1960s advertising industry, exploring themes of ambition, identity, and changing social landscapes. I have heard so many wonderful things about this show, but I've never seen that. And Jon Hamm and some of those talented actors that have kind of put their spin on this one. I heard so many great things about this particular show, but I've never seen it. I've never seen this one either, 2018's Chernobyl, a miniseries depicting the 1986 Chernobyl disaster, and it's lauded and it's applauded for its gripping storytelling and portrayal of the event. This is another show. It's now available on Disney Plus, one of my favorite animated shows, The Simpsons. It's been going on from 1989 to the present. This is another show that I could watch anytime, but there is a but to this, is that I will watch what is considered, at least to me, classic Simpsons from season 1 to season 10. And not that the other episodes past season 10 are less great as some of the early ones, but for me, it seemed to have peaked from between season 1 and season 10. Again, if you're a Simpsons fan, I'm sure you have some wonderful episodes after season 10, but for me, I can watch any episode from season 1 to season 10 of The Simpsons. This is one that I was a little surprised that they placed on the list, but this has been going on from 2016 to the present, and this is a science fiction horror series set in the 1980s featuring a group of children who uncover supernatural forces and a secret government experiment. And this is Stranger Things. I remember watching season 1 of Stranger Things, and it was a wonderful show. Started watching season 2, could not get into it as much as I did season 1, but I know it's very popular. It's got its own fan base. And I like the connection to the 80s because I was a child of the 80s. So a lot of the references and some of the things that they talked about, I can connect to. And it is a really great show. I just personally didn't follow it after season 2. So we've gone over the evolution of television. We've gone over what is considered, according to various internet sources, as some of the more important series of television. And I agree with some of them. Some of them I've never seen before. And so let's look at some television firsts, because so many things in the evolution of television happened throughout so many of the different years that were going on as we were watching television. Because what had happened was it was a medium that went from radio and these fireside chats that President FDR would meet with the American public, and then things started to shift to a more visual type medium. So you went from radio to television, and radio is still popular. And again, thank you so much for listening to radio with us. But we were looking for something different, and that's one of the evolutions again in not only television but media itself, was that transition from radio to TV and now to the internet. And so here are some television firsts. In 1936 was the first live sports broadcast, and it was the 1936 Olympics, and are recognized as the first ever live sports broadcast. Now, this was an interesting one that I had to actually go a little bit deeper in because I did not know who this was. And according to the list here, the very first cartoon on television was in 1950. And it was this character named Crusader Rabbit. And it was the first of its kind, featuring an adventurous rabbit in several stories that parodied popular movies of the time. Again, Crusader Rabbit. I had to look up who this character was because I had no idea who Crusader Rabbit was. First color television broadcast occurred in 1951. At exactly 4:35 p.m. on Monday, June 25th, 1951, CBS aired this show called Premiere in New York City, Boston and Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington. And it is recognized as the first commercial color television broadcast. So in 1951. Here's an interesting one that may not really fly today because of how television has evolved. But in 1953, we had the first pregnancy and birth as a storyline. In the show I Love Lucy, Lucille Ball became pregnant in real life. And her show headlined this as a storyline. And the word pregnancy was still too much for television, so you couldn't mention that Lucy was pregnant. So she was expecting. So that was an interesting thing, because as TV has evolved and has changed, I mean, for the fact that you can't mention pregnancy, you have to say expecting, oh my goodness, how things have changed. The first reality show, I know reality television became kind of big in the 90s, but according to the history, the first reality television show that is recognized is in 1956. The public just became fascinated with big money that was happening. And that's another topic that I really enjoy doing research on, and maybe we'll do another episode, is the quiz show Scandals of the 1950s. I am so intrigued by that topic. There was a wonderful movie called Quiz Show that appeared in 1994, or that premiered, 1994. Directed by Robert Redford, and it discusses the quiz show scandals. That's maybe for another episode, because I really like talking about that. I don't have too many people to talk about the quiz show scandals, but it's something that I'm intrigued by. But as money was being introduced to some of these talk shows and game shows, there was a show that premiered in 1956 called Queen for a Day. And it was a radio show, but again, we talked about how things were changing. And it had a television host that would ask women about their financial hardships and their struggles, and they tried to gain sympathy from the audience. The winner of this money was the one that the audience most applauded for. And so they were seated on the throne and awarded gifts and money. So that is considered the first reality television show. Now, this one was an interesting one, again, because how TV has changed. But in 1957, the first toilet appeared on screen. The producers of Leave It to Beaver had an extended back and forth about the network's executives featuring a scene of a toilet on the show. Because, again, showing bathrooms on television was too much and it was taboo. But in one episode of the show, one of the characters needed to hide a pet alligator in the toilet. So they made the toilet an essential part of the plot. Again, the fact that you couldn't show a toilet on television, my goodness, again, how television has changed. But again, you could not use the word toilet. Being a history buff, I really kind of got into this particular one. Was in 1960 the first televised presidential debate between the candidates John F. Kennedy and Vice President Richard Nixon. And according to, and I've heard this before and I actually read it again, was that if you watch that, again, primary source material, talk about a library term, if you watch that debate, John F. Kennedy came across as much smoother, much cooler, and he won people over. But according to what I've read, if you listen to the show and the presidential debate on the radio, it seems like Nixon had the higher standing crowd behind him. So it just depends, and another moment that happened is that in 1998, HDTV receivers were released to the public. So many firsts. And we could have kept going with this list, but I just wanted to narrow it down because we are running out of time, and I really enjoy putting this show together. So we're going to get a little more serious now, because now we're going to take a look at top 10 moments in which the world stood still and watched television. And we watched it collectively. And so these moments might get a little serious. Some of them are way before our time, at least my time. But as a history major and as somebody that really likes history, I've gone back and watched some of these clips. And again, primary source materials, if you're looking for those, this is the type of things that we're talking about. The first one, and again, there's no real order here, but these are some of the things that were brought up as part of this list where we stopped. The attack on Pearl Harbor. And television at that time was still in its infancy, so not too many people had televisions to hear and see the news. So what happened was, and you can see this in news coverage of the time, that a lot of people were going to their local furniture stores and watching televisions outside sometimes, or maybe in the stores. And again, this attack on Pearl Harbor was what prompted the United States to join the war efforts during World War II. Another event that changed the world and we stopped was Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech in 1963. I remember this one. And the reason I remember this next one is because it was on a Friday. And I had just returned from the movie theater after watching the Flintstones movie in 1994. And this was the O.J. Simpson police chase. I remember sitting in front of the television and watching O.J. Simpson being followed by these police in L.A. And if you've watched any documentary on the O.J. Simpson case, or if you've ever seen a movie or a television show, that is such an indelible thing that happened in 1994 as we were watching this back in June of 1994. And I just graduated from high school. I know I'm dating myself. So I was about to start college, and I remember it was that summer. The moon landing in 1969 is considered an event that not only changed the world and changed history, but it is one of the most viewed events ever by the world. The moon landing in 1969. I remember this one in 1986 because it's still, and we're going on 40 years next year on this event, but it's the Challenger space shuttle explosion. And I remember that we didn't have televisions in our classrooms at the time, not in our school. And so we didn't know about this or hear about this until we got home from school. And so once we heard about it, it was such a devastating thing because the teacher going up in space, the first citizen that was not an astronaut, was going to go into space. And it was exciting. The assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963. Speaking to my parents and people that were alive during that time, they say they remember exactly where they were at that moment when they heard the news. And we were glued to our televisions as we listened. In 1997, the death of Princess Diana. That was another event that I remember watching television and being glued to the news to see what was going on. And again, the internet was around, but it was very rough in what its content was. I remember this one specifically because my father so eloquently stated something in relation to this. And this was the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. And I still remember watching these Germans getting together after years of being separated, families, friends. And I still remember watching this live and my dad turning to me and telling me, "You are watching history." I always remember that. And even now, I have an interest in German history and German as a language. And that I always go back to that, to my dad telling me, "You were watching history as the Berlin Wall was coming down." Now, I don't know if you remember this one, but this is the rescue of baby Jessica. So I want to read this to you. In 1987, the world was caught up by a story of Jessica McClure, a young Texas girl from Midland, Texas, who fell into a well. And on Friday, October 19th, 1987, 18-month-old McClure, now known as baby Jessica, was rescued after firefighters went down the 22-foot deep shaft to pull her out. And I remember watching this on a Friday night, and we were all glued to the television to make sure she was going to be okay. And we all breathed. I remember we were watching this, and we were just praying and hoping that she was going to be okay. And then when she came out and they were carrying her and they gave her to her parents, and her parents saw her, I still remember that event. And I think it goes without saying that the world changed forever on September 11th, 2001. We were all watching television that day. I was a teacher at the time. And I remember it was our principal's birthday. And they had made an announcement about her celebrating her birthday. And then a couple of minutes after that, she came back onto the intercom. And she mentioned that something horrific had happened in New York, that a plane had hit one of the buildings of the World Trade Center. And she understood that we didn't have television in our classrooms, but if we were interested in watching the news, we could go to her office. And I remember the other teacher that I worked with, her and I, after the period ended, we went to her office, and as we were arriving into her office, the second plane is hitting the other tower. And again, it irrevocably changed history and the world. Now, you may have your own personal views as to what you felt were some of those moments that changed the world. Maybe some things that were not mentioned on this list because there are so many. But according to the internet and according to my research, these are what was happening that actually impacted and changed the world. One of the best parts of my show here for me is when I get to go out. One of my favorite parts, I guess I should say, is when I get to go out and talk to people about their experiences with the topic of the show. And so today's episode On television, I went out and I asked, what is your favorite television show and why? And here are the responses. And again, this is one of my favorite parts of the show is to kind of talk about what other people say. And so here's what they responded. I asked, what is your favorite television show and why? And here are the responses. Dawson's Creek, a drama for high school kids going through growing pains. Somebody else said, and I mentioned this show earlier, Friends. It was the first show that I followed and looked forward to watching every week. I remember that show used to come on Thursdays. Somebody else said, I am a big fan of The Simpsons. I have always thought it was funny and well written. Somebody else said Breaking Bad and Ozarks. And I really liked what they said of why they follow this show, or shows rather. They said the storylines are a little too ingenious not to be real. Somebody else said, I don't watch television. You know, when I was in 7th grade, I was in tennis. And my tennis coach commented one time, because we were talking about TV, and we were asking him, sir, do you watch this show? And he commented, I don't have a television. And I thought that was the strangest thing, the fact that he had no television. And this is before the internet. So you would get your news from, if it wasn't television, from newspapers. So he commented, I don't have a television. And we all looked at each other. We thought, that's really strange. Maybe some people now don't have televisions because they get to watch them on their tablets and cell phones. Another person said, when asked what their favorite TV show was and why, they said Gilmore Girls. It's about a dysfunctional mother and daughter relationship, and I've always enjoyed the stories. Somebody else said Game of Thrones. I really enjoy the fantasy element of it all. And another person said classic Law and Order SVU. Always kept me on my toes. Thank you so much for those that I did ask and for your answers and responses. Again, one of my favorite parts of the show. Thank you so very much, everybody. The time just goes by so fast when we're together. But I really do thank you for your support. I really thank you for tuning in every single week. If you're having some difficulty through the UTRGV Vaqueros website, radio website, you can always download a free app called Radio Garden, and you can listen to the show live from there. And again, if you've missed an episode, not only of this show, but any other show, you can go to the Vaquero YouTube channel, Vaquero Radio YouTube channel, and listen to not only this show, but some of the other wonderful productions that are put together. I want to wish everybody a wonderful week. Next week, again, we'll already be in April. It is going by very, very quickly. If you need any assistance from the library, I talked about this earlier, please do not hesitate to come by. And we want to wish everybody a wonderful week, and we'll see you all next time. Muchas gracias. Hasta luego. Bye.